Welcome, everyone. Happy Monday and halfway through April already. This year is just flying by. I don't know if it's me, Phyllis, but do you feel that way with 2025?
Yeah, I can't believe it's already April. I mean, it's crazy.
Crazy. Let me just make sure everybody can hear and see us okay. Can you hear and see us okay? Gonna throw that out in chat real quick, everybody. Just make sure we're all coming through with everybody, and hopefully we'll get as people are getting in here. We have Keith Barthold joining us as another one. Thank you for letting us know, everybody. Let me just turn off all my dings and dongs that are always fun if you forget. Hey, Ann, welcome and great to see you. Hope you had a great weekend. Okay, so let me also, hey, Joel, let me just make sure. Okay, well, hopefully we get Keith Barthold in here. He's up I was going to say number 2, but that didn't sound right, Chris. All right. So just a few announcements that you'll start hearing over the next few weeks that we're going to start promoting. Believe it or not, we are 1 month out of the 5th year anniversary of the CyberCall. Yeah.
Wow.
Congratulations, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Chip. Like I said, you'll see a lot of promotion around this on LinkedIn and social coming up. We're gonna actually bring back Kyle from Huntress, one of the originals. So the original cast was Kyle, Wes, Gary, and myself. I created it right after we did the first virtual event coming out of the pandemic. We had 1,700 people on it. And this is what was the continuation of it. So Wes is coming back, Kyle's coming back, and Gary. It'll be May 19th. And it'll be like an hour and a half session. And we'll look at past, present, and future over the last, 5 years. We're going to be looking at, kind of retrospect of what's transpired over the past 5 years in terms of threat, business, etc. Look at where we are today and what each of these folks thinks is where we're headed in the next 5 years. So that's coming up. And did I have anything else I wanted to mention? Oh, that's about it right now. So this week we've got the conversation here, and we'll introduce Chip in a moment. But Phyllis, we try to do some of the really major threat reports.
Yep.
Each year. Every year we have Verizon on, and hopefully we'll get them back with us this year. Each year we've had Philippe Langlois, who's just been phenomenal, and so we'll have him back. And we've had Clark on with CrowdStrike, and there's Keith. Let's bring Keith on in. Hey, Keith. Hey. And we've had, and then this year, what I just has blown me away, because I've followed this report over the past 5 years, is the SASE report by SaaS. And Chip, we're going to get into this, but the amount of data that you guys have now is like head scratching and shaking. How much data you guys are collecting, and the breadth of MSPs and downstream SMBs. So I thought it was really important for people out there to understand, the SaaS-based attacks, because we certainly can see the shift from threat actors where they're going, and it is based on the whole thesis of why you founded SaaS, which is going to be identity. Hey, Keith, do you mind just muting, because we're getting a lot of feedback on your stuff right now?
Yeah.
But it's a great garage. I love it.
It is
not mine. Wish it was mine.
Is that a fake background? Because I'm jealous.
I'm here with a fellow MSP owner, Trent, that exited around the same time as me. So we're just playing now.
The side effects of successfully exiting.
That's right.
So Chip, this report, when I was looking at it, and oh, by the way, I'll put the URL in for everybody right now so you can get it. There's the URL. 43,000 SMBs, over 2,500 SMBs, and over, if I remember correctly, over 7 billion alerts.
Events. Not
Events. Right.
Thank God they aren't 7 billion alerts. It's
Sorry.
only about 1% of those that are actual alerts. But yeah,
Thank you.
If they were alerts, I think Chip would have even less hair.
our clients would skin us if all 7 billion events were alerts.
Yeah.
Sorry, events, but just an astounding data set. So with that, Chip, welcome back. We haven't had you on in a while, but for those that don't know you, if you could share a little bit about yourself. You've got some pedigree in the MSP space as well. So welcome, and tell everybody a little about yourself.
Well, yeah, thanks, Andrew. I certainly started off my career in technology. Well, sort of after the coder part of my life. I started off as what we used to call a VAR. This was before the term MSP really existed. And we definitely transitioned into an MSP, but we carried that VAR DNA with us. We were solution resellers for CRM systems and accounting systems. Definitely got out of the hardware side of that business in the very early aughts, because it didn't feel like to us the margins were worth it. And we got into the software end really with the first product that we built. Was called Cloud Workspace. It was a product aimed at managing virtual desktop infrastructure, which back then the thesis was data is what people are really after, and it can be better protected inside of a VDI architecture than just leaving it on servers in small offices. I still believe in that thesis, by the way, but the world has moved to SaaS, and we exited that business in 2018 and almost immediately started working on the idea for SaaS alerts, because we just the trend was too obvious. Most of SMB data was going into SaaS environments, particularly 365, Google Workspace, Sales, Slack, all that stuff. So that's how we got where we are, and it's been a really fun run. The last 5 years, you've been following us, working with us to help us build and grow our audience, and I think our thesis turned out to be correct. In the end, it's really about user behavior analysis, or I like to clarify it and put a fine pin on it, which is account behavior analysis, because not all accounts are users. And that's becoming, if not the key to overall information security and data protection, it's certainly one of the keystones in a strong arch.
Yeah. It's been a really cool to see what you guys have done, Chip, and the thesis, was spot on. And certainly the market agreed with you with the velocity of adoption. So with that, Phyllis, let you kick things on off with Chip.
Yeah, sure. First off, great to see you. It's been a while. So
you too, Phyllis.
So happy 2025. So even though we're well into it. So the 2025 SASE report has a ton of good data, some of it alarming, all of it actionable, with actionable trends. So from your perspective, what's the most surprising insight that you saw in the data?
Well, this is going to sound maybe counter surprising, but the most surprising thing to me is how consistent it is in terms of the types of attacks that are successful, and how they really haven't changed in the last maybe 2 or 3 years. The token hijack thing really reared its ugly head in maybe late 2022, early 2023. That became the predominant way of successful attacks. It took the password sprays and brute force attacks took a back seat to that in terms of the success of the attacks, and that's continued. I think the initial introduction of products for the hacking industry, and I use that air fingers quote, but it really is its own marketplace, its own industry. Products to help script kiddies become very sophisticated hackers. that really seemed to kick off a huge surge in successful compromises using token theft, and it's continued to advance. Our internal team plays with and studies those tools, and we went from 1 to 2 to now close to a dozen different products on the marketplace that are completely integrated end to end to help people to drive from phishing to successful token hijacking to data exfiltration and start the loop over again. Now that you got data coming out, you can just go attack vendors, customers, everything else of the people that you just ripped off the first time. So we've seen that cycle really, really grow and become much, much more powerful.
So you kind of covered this, but can you kind of break it down for the group and explain why token hijacking is so dangerous, and how is it that we can defend against it?
Well, the reason it's so dangerous is because the entire SaaS world has a vulnerability, and the vulnerability is the browser, the interface. And in order to go from the step where you're authenticating as a user to having authorization to actually use the product that's behind that browser interface, you get what's called an authorization token. And those tokens can be temporary. Sometimes they last a long time. Some products allow you to set a duration, a lifespan for that token. Think of it like a TTL for a DNS setting almost. Others, it can last forever. Slack is one of those that you log into Slack, and unless your administrator is very focused on making sure the tokens expire, they're going to just sit there, virtually for infinity. Microsoft has gotten better about this, but nowhere near enough businesses or MSPs that manage those businesses are setting token expirations or token security. It's so dangerous because I think there's two elements to it. Number one is phishing scams have gotten better and better and better. AI is improving them because it's localizing language better. And people are falling for them. And that's the spear point for that token hijack. It's getting someone to go to a now very, very realistic looking login page that is bogus, generally speaking, and adding their credentials and passing that authorization token back to an attacker. That attacker can then take that token and plug it into any browser anywhere in the world, drop it in because it's basically a cookie, and now instantly access all that person's resources. So that's the problem. It's far beyond just getting access to only a mailbox, or the days when we all had Exchange servers in our offices. You could get to the Exchange server, but that didn't necessarily get you all the way through to everybody's data storage and everything else. You had the email, but you didn't get everywhere. Now, once you're in a SaaS product like Google or Microsoft in particular, that has all the other services connected to it, that attacker's got access to the whole thing, everything. It's an open book. And the way we protect people from this, and again, this, to those who haven't talked through this before, it may sound kind of like a counter argument, but there's actually no way to stop it. Once an authorization token has been stolen, there's no way to prevent that hacker from accessing that environment. So the compromise occurs. What's key is how fast can you observe it? And the way you observe it is back to our original thesis, which is account behavior analysis. What's going on with this account that doesn't look normal? Where it's being connected to from, what are they doing with data? What are they doing with mailboxes, rules in mailboxes, forwarding, exfiltrating a whole bunch of files at once. All this stuff adds up into very, very consistent patterns. And our software has been trained to spot that and stop and alert and then shut down the account within minutes of that compromise occurring. And that's really the big thing. This is just like having a heart attack, right? It's that first 30 minutes after someone's having a heart attack that you have an opportunity to save them, or a stroke. If you can shut down the problem very, very quickly, you can prevent the data exfiltration, all the extra damage and everything else.
That's awesome. That was a really great explanation, by the way. Thank you so much. So you mentioned phishing. Phishing as a service exploded in 2024. So how is it that MSPs should shift their focus, or what kind of defenses that they should be putting in place in light of phishing campaigns, and now that they're being outsourced at scale?
Well, the number one is user training. I mean, I think all of us as security professionals know that in the end, the biggest vulnerability in a system is between the seat and the keyboard. So we have to figure out how to raise awareness. There's lots of great anti-phishing simulation software out there. I certainly recommend that everyone add that to their stack for their customers. That's one of those things that personally I think it's so important to do that you got to find a way to stick it into your bundle of services to a customer, even if you can't mark it out and charge for it right away. You really have to force it down, people's necks. It's so important.
Yeah, in the contract. I
Yeah.
mean, we just required it. Like, it's so important that we don't want to mess with that. Like, train your users. It's in your contract. It's required.
So I have go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, Keith, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something, I've talked to, and Chris certainly chime in here. When talking to Eric Tilds, who, gets involved, between, he and, whether it's a Spencer, who we can mention, which is a right of boom attorney. But what you even see, Keith and Chris, please chime in here. You'll even see when they're cyber, the attorneys on the, end customer get involved. It's one of the things, if it is phishing that was, patient zero, it's one of the things they go right into the MSP about, like, show us your documentation about your phishing education, your phishing simulations, how often was it, your policies that you worked on with your, like, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, man, they go right at the MSP.
Well, it can definitely help you, right? So they do go after that. What policies are in place? What training? And obviously, like I say all the time, you got to have an audit trail behind that. So you can say you have it, but if you don't have that audit trail, so you're right. Exactly where the MSP needs to come in is number one, is make sure that they have that audit trail. So if their client does ever need it, they can produce it pretty quickly, and that it's rock solid. The other thing I'd say on this training thing is super important. But what I have noticed is that we get a little complacent as service providers in what we're providing. And so you got to remember that you need to have something that appeals, that these people are actually going to pay attention to and learn from. And if the content is somewhat stagnant year after year after year, you're not doing a good job of what they're expecting you to, is to provide content and training materials that actually, number one, is timely and relevant, but number two, that they actually go, okay, I get, this is what makes sense to me.
Yeah, Chris, so spot on. I just had a conversation last Thursday with a local charity that I sit on the board, and obviously mostly for the technology stuff. And they brought up KnowBe4 specifically, that their MSP is trying to sell them. And I said, absolutely. There's no question you guys have to find some tool. It doesn't matter to me what it is. There's many good ones out there. But ask them about who is going to actually create the simulations, what the timing looks like. Is it you guys inside in the internal IT staff who have some, knowledge and context for what is actually going to get by people and fool them? Is it, the MSP themselves? Like, that is the most important piece of this, is who creates the content. Otherwise, it's just not a powerful enough tool on its own.
Exactly.
Yeah, Chip, can I just throw this in there, and any and all, please respond. So I take security awareness training, right? And one of the companies I work with, and what I find is I think it's lagging, and what I mean by that is, Chip, we talk week in and week out about the attacks, whether it's the CAPTCHA attacks, whether it's standing up SaaS infrastructure attacks, etc. And it could be because of the velocity in which threat actors pivot. Okay, you're getting me here. Okay, I'm going to pivot here. There's this lag effect, and that's my concern. I'm not saying, again, it's like, of course, do MFA, right? And threat actors are doing token hijacking, right? But my concern is the lag. Can you talk about that a little bit and what your thoughts are there?
I have the same concern, Andrew, but I don't really have a solution for it. I mean, Microsoft and Google in particular, if you think of them as the two biggest mail providers, they've got decent, anti-phishing products built into their stack, and there's third-party products out there, but no one can keep up with the rate of change of identifying a phishing email. So, as soon as one campaign gets really successfully flagged, either because of the infrastructure that it's using or the kind of language that's in it or whatever else. I mean, even AI is being applied to this now. Something else comes along, somebody changes the script, changes the infrastructure that they're using, the focus of the language in the attack, and they get around it. I mean, wouldn't it be nice, and we talk about this a lot, Andrew, you and I are like, you always feel like you're saying the same things over and over again. It should be so simple to just tell an end user, look, don't click on anything, any link, any document, anything, unless it's from someone you know and you're expecting to get it. Like the someone you know part now isn't even enough. If my account gets compromised and this guy finds out that I regularly email you and Phyllis on a set of topics, he'll create a phishing campaign to get you and Phyllis, on those topics and have you click on something. So it literally has to be something lands in your inbox. If you aren't expecting it, don't know the person, don't touch it. But we can't bring that across to to our customers, to the people who we are here to help, in a powerful enough way. So we need to keep driving forward with the solutions they have. Ben just posted doing lunch and learns with pizza in the chat. Yeah, that's a great time to bring across this message. It's like, guys, I'll tell you what, no more phishing campaigns if you all can figure this out and never click on something that you aren't expecting to get.
Yeah, I just tell to add to that, I say, you need to slow down and verify. I think people are just, especially when it comes to emails, they're just processing emails. They're doing whatever they can to either read, discard, or file that email or take action, right? And they're just so focused on getting to that finish line, getting through those emails, that they don't think about, hey, some of these things I really need to slow down and verify, whatever that takes. And it gets harder these days. I mean, we've talked about it in prior episodes. Used to be you could just pick up the phone and call, but now you got to be concerned that the threat actor might have compromised the phone system at the other end.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's where that training comes back. I think you're right, Andrew. To the point is that there is a lag in that the training content usually is produced annually, yet the tweaks and the things that happen with these attacks happen daily. And so trying to get that in front of people and make it and not disrupt their day, disrupt their productivity. You can't train them on this stuff every day. Would be cool. Bless you, Phyllis. I'm sure you're sneezing, but we can't hear you, but I'm gonna say bless you anyway. But the point is, yeah, I mean, we got to figure that out. I mean, what we see in our BEC stuff is, I can even attest, I have seen exactly where an MSP had SaaS alerts in place and it did catch something quickly, and the MSP was able to respond and do those necessary actions that prevented the situation from being a lot worse. And if you looked at what happened, that MSP had so many controls in place, and that user just went through and approved, agree, approved, whatever it was. And it was like 5 or 6 things that user had to do to finally have that attack happen, and it still happened. So it's kind of crazy.
So Phyllis, I know this never happens in the enterprise, but just comment. When we start to see version 9 of the controls, or in the discussions you guys are having now, obviously security awareness training is part of the controls. Any changes we might see, or any things you guys are discussing in terms of the way in which threat actors are leveraging SaaS these days and relationships to the big Google, the big email providers that Chip's talking about, they're so pervasive.
I mean, I'll have to look into that. We're collecting our thoughts and notes now, quite honestly. But I mean, anti-phishing training is already a safeguard. Excuse me. I mean, I think, in my mind, as I'm listening to the conversation, maybe we say, you can't just do anti-phishing training at least once a year. Like maybe there is like campaigns that you have to run monthly. I'm curious, what is the recommendation of the group?
Well, I'll offer mine just in terms of the policy that we put in place within our business is that.
Which, mind you, Chip, I'm going to give you a little shout out here, because not all vendors have done what you've done. You went full ISO, which was good for you guys. So
full ISO and full OWASP.
Yeah, I was going to say, and OWASP, and basically following BSIM principles. So again, you guys hats off to you guys as a vendor who put in like immense time into your security of your core code and all the training around it. So please continue.
Well, so our, even as a relatively small company, we had a compliance officer full-time right out of the gate. And his job was audit, internal audit, compliance, obviously dealing with our audit vendors for the external stuff. But one of his side jobs is every month he does phishing simulation inside of our company. And it's very effective. The first 6 months he was catching people all the time. By the time he got to 9 or 12 months, very rarely does anybody get caught up because they're all looking for it. And we don't publicly embarrass people, but we certainly joke about it a little bit on on team calls and discuss the experience of why. If somebody, you have to have this as like an open and embracing policy inside your company. If you do get caught by the phishing simulation, share the experience with everyone. What about it, led you to go ahead and click on those things, and acknowledge the understanding that you got from that. The more you share that inside the organization, the better off you are. And I think a lot of companies, based on my observation, they treat it very privately. Somebody, gets picked up and it's a big secret, and they have like kind of a little counseling session between the auditor or whoever is running it, and they talk about it a little bit. It's not a mark of failure that you fell for a phishing simulation the first time, maybe the fifth time in a row if you did there, but it's a mark of success when you learn from it. And I think adopting that that psychology inside of the business would really, really help.
I really like that a lot, the discussion afterward. I think for us internally, you just get additional training. Like if you, they're like, now we're going to train you more because you made a mistake.
Compared to what we do as cybersecurity professionals, when something bad happens, what do? We go to and generate a root cause analysis, and then our internal team, we talk about it. All right, how are we going to fix this? What do we learn from it? What do we have to change in our processes to get better? I think it's the same thing that we're trying to bring across to all the other knowledge workers who aren't cyber security professionals around this specific topic.
Yeah. It's great, Phyllis. We're coming out with a new phishing here to help all end users. It's the morning after phishing, so we'll be out with that soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
My last question for you, Chip, is now we have the average SMB using over 100 SaaS apps. How can we gain and maintain better visibility across all these different environments? And how does an organization even start?
It certainly is a challenge. I'm going to start answering your question by identifying a weakness in a lot of SaaS apps. And that is that they don't do adequate logging of their own products to pass on to a SIM solution that somebody's running in an enterprise or a product like ours. And, we're not the only people in town who collect all this data. So this isn't a SaaS Alerts commercial, but, trying to use a tool where you get as much of the data in as you can is very, very important. And the more apps that are connected, the more correlation information you can get about what's going on with that user account. So, because we're in the days of OAuth for most SaaS applications, right? People are encouraged to sign in with either Duo or 365 login or Google OAuth. They use that across many different applications. And now we can follow the user behavior activity from one application to the next, one device to the next, one location to the next. We've caught countless actual alerts, events that became alerts because of the correlation between different applications used by the same account. I'm Andrew Morgan at cybercall.com, and I'm logged into my Salesforce in Los Angeles, and I'm logged into Google Workspace in Miami. Instantly suspicious. So, that's the approach that you have to take. And for people who are using, let's say, secondary or tertiary SaaS applications where they can't get logging, I would just encourage you to jump on those vendors and say, you got to log everything that a user does. For the moment they authenticate and get in that system, log everything that they do and give us a way to get the information. Webhooks, API, doesn't matter what it is, give us a way to get that information and pull it out.
Yeah, even Microsoft is like, they used to provide much more logging years ago than they do today. They stripped that down, and so it's painful to know how much logging could potentially be available that these vendors just don't make available.
Well, I was going to ask you that, Chip. After the storm incident, Microsoft said, "Hey, we're going to open up." Remember that whole thing? Are you guys are obviously deep into their APIs and their graphs, or the graph, right? And pulling data. Are you getting any more since that whole incident? And
I wouldn't say we're getting more. I would say that they've made more available to lower tier licensees. We've always, if you're an E3 or an E5 kind of customer, almost everything was available to you anyway. They brought some of that down into the P1 licenses or the business premium, which is useful. Chris is right. I think everybody that does anything in security reads the Microsoft log, the log data that's coming out of Entra. Very useful, no question about it. Lots of good stuff there. But to really get after the other stuff, you've got to be capable of building individual, pretty complex API queries that are pulling down, many, many thousands of events per second, and then parsing through those and figuring them out. And that it's difficult. The log information that comes out is kind of sanitized for you by Microsoft. The raw data that comes out is, when I log into a 365 environment, that act of logging in creates 25 different events, most of which are completely useless. The only thing that I really need to get to our customer, to the SaaS Alerts customer, is, okay, Andrew logged in from this place with this machine using this application at this moment in time. Like, that's the only event that we need to create. And that stuff is challenging for a lot of organizations to work with, because to boil everything down to that event, you've got to parse through a whole lot of data to get there.
It's why Chris is recommending everybody goes back to on-prem Exchange, right, Chris?
Yeah, no, just send letters back and forth.
All right, over to you, Chris.
Actually, it's over to Keith. Keith, welcome, and congrats on the semi-retirement. And you can take us around, with the iPad and show us all the good stuff. No,
I wish this was mine. A fellow peer that exited around the same time, Trent, with him here in Kansas City, and we got to race Porsches around Ozarks International Raceway yesterday. So
nice, enjoy.
We're recovering from that.
Well, that's that doesn't make, the whole reason we had you come on, Keith, is because we thought you were really bored, but it doesn't sound
bored.
So thanks for joining us and come out of retirement, Keith. Let you ask Mr. Chip some questions.
Yeah, so Chip, I'm hearing like that 40% of the shares that are going outside of organization file shares are outside of the MSP. And certainly, like our clients at DKB were very interactive with their clients and collaborating with file shares, and that's certainly a huge threat vector around that. So what do you recommend on that sort of file share collaboration between companies to reduce the threat?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and there's an interesting subtext to this that I'm going to lay a disclaimer. We still haven't figured out really why this is, but consumers of 365 versus Google Workspace share externally, from their organization, about twice as many files as in the Microsoft world. I don't really know why that is, but it's super clear in our data. Like, it's unambiguous. I think the number one thing that you should be doing, back to the Microsoft universe, which is most of our customers, of small business customers that are using an online productivity product, is set expiration dates on when you share something, a file, whether it's shared through Teams or or SharePoint or OneDrive directly. Set an expiration date on the share. And if you have something that you truly want the whole world to download, or even a small subset of the world that's all your customers, and you want it available on that's all the time, put it on a SharePoint site that's specifically made for that. Don't just hang it out there and say, I'm going to put, I don't know, I want to interact with my accountant, so we're going to put all of our monthly statements out there perpetually forever. Like, it's just a bad idea. I'm not a fan of sharing attachments in email when it comes to corporate data, for the very same reason. Now you've lost control of it. So, do your best to train users to keep it inside kind of the walled garden of the productivity suite that you're using, and use the tools that are available both in SharePoint and OneDrive and Google Drive to restrict that as much as possible. And when it's no longer needed, turn it off, get rid of that share.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Well,
I can give you a little personal. So my wife is a photographer, and then she shares out the digital images. And sometimes she used to have like a pretty short leash duration on that type of stuff, but then people always come back and say, I haven't had a chance to look at them or whatever. So she would extend that duration. Well, she would pop in there every once in a while, and it would be what she's sharing, but those people would then use it as their personal file share. So here's her share that she's providing access to just for them. But now they got all sorts of documents and stuff in there that she doesn't need to be seen. She's like, what the heck are you doing? So people are really terrible with understanding what the purpose and how to correctly use file sharing applications.
Yeah, I have some pretty interesting pictures of you, Chris, from your wife.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Those are all AI generated.
you got to start copywriting your image or something, Chris, because AI thing's a real threat to your personality.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, so while we're talking about the file sharing, so Chip, talk to us a little bit about orphan file shares and file sharing links rather, and what do we implement today? What should MSPs be putting in place that start eliminating those like orphaned external file shares?
Yeah, we call them orphaned links, and we track that very specifically as part of the the file activity tracking that we do in SaaS alerts. And our concern is, and the way what we're looking for is a file that has been shared but no one's accessed for a long time, and often from the Microsoft 365 world associated with a guest user account, which also hasn't been activated for a long time. So, going back in and identifying both of those things and cleaning them up, as systematically as possible. It's actually a much smaller job and much easier to tackle if you get either the customer or the MSP or both in the practice of doing that. If not monthly or weekly, even daily. But it's a personal hygiene thing, right? Like you don't invite guests over to your house and leave a whole bunch of stuff laying all around. You pick things up, you put them away, you get rid of the trash. It's sort of the same thing. And I think Microsoft themselves recommends that this is a every 30-day exercise for an organization that has good hygiene and is running well. Certainly that to me is a minimum. There's no reason not to do it weekly. It's something you can do in 5 minutes weekly. It's something that every individual can do at the end of their day, as they're staring there at the mailbox that they know they're never going to clean out. You know what? I'm just going to go make sure that I don't have any file shares out there that are hanging naked and could be accessed. Somebody accesses a guest user account that was created specifically for the share that no one's monitoring anymore because it's a guest user account. The guest isn't using it. No one knows if it's logged into or not. Lock those things down, set them to block sign in, remove the file shares behind them. And just keep tidying up after yourself as you go along. It's a chore, and it's a really bad chore if you let it pile up like a term paper, the night before you start working on it. If you do a little bit, every week, every day, every month, it's just not that big a deal.
Cool. So VPNs, man, we're still seeing attacks around VPNs and evading geofencing alerts. What does that look like now? What does monitoring for that look like with SaaS alerts in 2025 for VPNs?
Yeah, it's gotten worse, honestly. You have VPNs, of course, which, a sophisticated attacker is going to use to obfuscate their geolocation. Interestingly enough, in the beginning phase of a compromise, again, mostly focused on token hijacking, but even brute force or password sprays, the initial attacker often isn't hiding behind a VPN. We see a lot of this from consistent countries, Kenya, Brazil, places that we've kind of come to recognize as like, oh, it's coming from there. Well, we know where this is going. But when they pass those credentials or that token on to the guy who's an experienced hacker who's going to live off the land, stay persistent, they're going to use a VPN. And they also started, especially last year, Andrew, we talked about this early last year on one of the SASE calls, using the old botnet networks to lease a local IP address specifically for very, very targeted persistence and phishing attacks. You want to make it appear, if I'm in Allentown, Pennsylvania, which is the closest city to where I am, and I'm a hacker, I'm going to want to make it appear as if I'm coming from right down the street, a couple blocks over. Really isolate using that botnet IP address that I can now rent and bounce off of that and make it look like I'm super local. So it's an ongoing problem. One of the things in our data that is not surprising to me is the geolocations where the unsuccessful attacks are coming from, mostly the password sprays and brute forces. China's at the top of the list. In fact, of the top 5, they're more than half of the top 5 just themselves. But what does surprise me is on successful compromises, the top 5 actors there don't look anything like they do on the unsuccessful side. All of a sudden, China, Russia, the Koreas, they vanish. And now you're looking at the attacks look like they're coming from Germany, Australia, Philippines, places where you wouldn't normally associate it and say, well, this is where the bad actors live. So they're obviously shifting to different environments using VPNs to obfuscate geolocation.
So just clarify, Chip, do you think that initial where they're like, hey, I don't care if you know where I'm coming from, is the reconnaissance piece of it, where they're just spraying and trying to figure out what's open, what's available, and we don't care if you know where we're coming from.
Right, because they're not going to be there long. They're just their only role in the whole economy of the data exfiltration hacking business, I suppose. Their only role is to just get access to an account, and then you give it to somebody else. Like, they're a specialist. That's what they do. Think of sales organizations, right? You got guys who are hunter killers and they dial for dollars, and their thing is, you know what? You just got to make 100 phone calls a day, and when you get 3 of those to actually win a bite, you pass it on to a guy who can actually sell. It's the exact same process, just magnified with tons of automation and people that are starting out low level in the organization, and it's going to take a while to work their way up, and they're not going to get there until they've handed over or sold or whatever, their 10,000 accounts that they've compromised.
And this is where I see geofencing. People do a poor job of explaining geofencing, because when we are involved in responding to attacks, people are like, but we had geofencing, and so they think it's somewhat of a silver bullet that is going to protect them from people outside the US or whatever, and it's not the case. And then we see people that are like over geofencing, and they're actually blocking legitimate stuff, and then they're complaining about that. So I just think that from a risk perspective, you have to continue to do geofencing, but you have to explain it to your clients so they understand it well, to say, hey, this is geofencing. This is going to get us part of the way there, but in no stretch is it a silver bullet. It's going to protect you from everybody trying to attack you.
Yeah, it's one layer, right? And we've all learned over our careers as cybersecurity professionals that it's defense in depth, and it's layered. The way the image that I paint for people when I'm talking about this to somebody that just hasn't heard it before, imagine somebody shooting at you and you're standing there with a bulletproof vest. How many layers of Kevlar do you want? You're gonna rely on one? No.
Like
You want a bunch of layers there that are going to stop and diffuse the penetration of that attack. This is the same thing. Geofencing is part of a much bigger picture of layered defense.
All right. So last question, Chip, from me. 11,500 alerts or breaches, actually, that you guys thwarted at SaaS Alerts through your Respond module. Either you've got a huge army of minions, or you got a little bit of automation in place. Maybe you can talk us through what that looks like, how you're doing it. We want to know the secret sauce, man.
Well, in terms of minions, we're still under just about a 50-person company. And when we developed our Respond module,
that's a lot of alerts per person to handle, it seems like. Maybe a little automation there.
Yeah, a little bit of automation. When we developed Respond, I think we're probably at about 18 people. We've
Nice.
grown a lot since then as we've added even more functionality, but virtually all of that is done through the Respond module. So, and we train the module ourselves. We train the expert system. I'm not going to use the term AI because Andrew knows that I hate it, by the way. I still like it's when you say AI, people automatically think like, I don't know, Total Recall or something. We train the expert system the way we want it to function, but we also allow our partners to build their own rules and chain together. There's over 300 different event types that we track, and our partners can chain those event types together and build any attack chain simulation that they want that says, look for this that happens within this amount of time, and then that happens, and then this happens, and that happens. They can mix applications into that. They can mix IP addresses, ASN names, really anything they want, and build really complex rule sets. And that's what's picking up when these compromises occur. And we have some terrific partners. I know Ben is listening in on this call. In a sense, Ben is our own internal best customer. He runs our MSA group, but he works with our largest, most sophisticated partners. And together, they talk about what's going on. What are we seeing? What kind of behavior sequences are we seeing that that indicate a compromise has just occurred? And we model those into the software, and the software does its job. It automatically sees something and then shuts things down.
Chip, you also have I can see Corey on, from Solutions Granted.
Oh yeah, Corey is in there.
We have
Corey's team is probably Ben's number one collaborator. They do it. Zach is the guy. I know that Ben and Zach probably interact multiple times a day, and they're constantly sharing information. And to that point, this call, Andrew, is an example of it. You've built a great community here, but constantly sharing more and more little nuggets, the tiniest things. Having no one group of threat researchers by themselves is ever going to catch every permutation and possibility of what's being used in a post-compromise scenario. So, sometimes it's something as little as a user agent identified, deep inside a connection string. And all of a sudden you realize, hold on a second, all of these user agents are coming from the same place, and the same kind of, data exfiltration is occurring once they show up. Wait a minute, we've got something here. And that kind of feedback, it's a never ending loop. You put it in the system, you train it, you see what happens when it comes out, starts grabbing things, you realize that stuff actually was compromised. Now there's Corey. Zach is my hero. Right on, Corey.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's its own like little threat sharing community, which is such a great thing, Chip. Okay, well, let's get over to the other response, the feet on the ground response, Chip. Let's get into what Chris is dealing with these days in this, and because I'm sure this is picked, over the years, Chris, SaaS-based attacks are where it's at for you as well. So over to you, Chip.
Or Chris.
So I think we're going to have you ask him the questions if you see down there, Chip. Is that possible?
If it is, Andrew, then I did not.
If people didn't know, this is highly scripted.
Yeah, you can see.
We do about 12 rehearsals before every CyberCall.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm breaking the mold because
that's okay. I can kick it off.
For any. Yeah. Why don't you run the questions?
Yeah, that's fine. So Chris is, someone that leads DFIR, investigations into active breaches constantly. Give us a sense of what you're seeing, in SaaS-based attacks, over the past 12 months.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, we haven't really talked about, it's in the report, but we haven't talked about, obviously, the platforms that are under attack that the MSPs run, and that's still prevalent. I mean, there's a group out there that's specifically targeting tiny MSPs, and they're going after their platforms, right? And so those still occur. So if you want to talk about SaaS platforms, probably MSPs uses the most and depend on the most. And I would say, just like I've said it year after year, the platforms the MSPs use are probably the most dangerous SaaS platforms out there. They can inflict the most damage in the wrong hands pretty quickly. So I would say that, for us, obviously the cloud storage platforms are twofold. Number one is if a threat actor is able to get in there, they will wreak havoc in a storage platform. They will go in and they know how to permanently delete files. They know how to exfiltrate data out of there pretty easily. And, in some cases we do see where things sync, where the data gets encrypted. But the other side of it is those cloud storage platforms are also a very handy tool for the threat actors that exfiltrate information to put on there. So whether that's a cloud storage or a cloud backup platform or whatever the case may be, we see that. And a lot of times, and I'm not going to name any names, but a lot of times when we reach out to a vendor that has a cloud storage platform that's being used for nefarious purposes to store exfiltrated data or whatever, they're usually very cooperative in shutting that down, but they're not as proactive about monitoring for that stuff as you would think that does. And they say their reasons are privacy. And I'm, that's a tough one. I think there is, I think that's
Until it comes to billing, Chris.
Do what?
Until it comes to billing.
So it comes to billing. That's exactly right. And so, no, it's real interesting what happens with those platforms. Now, as far as the other SaaS platforms, I think where we see a lot of things happen is with internal threats and people using those platforms to get information out, and people are not paying that much attention to what their employees are. Now, we don't see a bunch of those cases, but when we do see those cases, SaaS platforms seem to play a role in that they're not necessarily monitoring what their people are accessing, how much data they're accessing, and what they're doing with it. So I think back to what Chip was talking about, usage, and specifically around account behavior monitoring. I mean, that's really, really important to kind of know what's happening when and where, and especially how much data. I mean, Chip talked about it very early on about data security, and that is still, to me as well. I talk about it. It's so important. And with SaaS platforms, it's not more difficult, but it does take some work to monitor those platforms correctly to make sure people are using them. And a lot of people don't restrict time of use either in today's world, right? You're just like, well, do your employees really need to be accessing it 3 o'clock in the morning? And you're like, well, our people work around the clock, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, no, I mean, tell your people not to work at 3 o'clock in the morning. Tell them to just, take and then close that stuff off. So that's what that's kind of my commentary on it.
Chris, just if you and Chip could just banter about this real quick. Chip, what is it? The 100 plus SMBs, 100 plus SaaS applications on average right now. Wasn't that the stat, give or take? So Chris, let's just start with some of the forensic gaps you see when it comes to SaaS applications, but specifically M365 or Google. Chip alluded to this a little bit, but just in general, have you walked into places and people go like, really, we're running that? Starting there with inventory, it's something that Phyllis and we've talked about ad nauseum, right, with the controls, but with SaaS, it's the Wild West.
Oh, it is the Wild West. I mean, we've seen people run 3, 4, 5 different SaaS-based project management platforms, right? And there's all sorts of attachments and stuff that get uploaded into there. And just like Chip was talking about, there's no purging process. There's just stuff that's out there, forever. They're not, doing with that. I mean, I would say like with, like from our BEC team, the majority of the attacks we look at are 365, but the ones that are G Suite, our team will tell you the G Suite information is much cleaner and easier to process for us from an investigative perspective than the 365 is. There's much more stuff we have to kind of filter through and, do all that kind of stuff. And I see Chip nodding his head on that one. But people just don't understand, like when they adopt a SaaS platform, whether it's in kind of a shadow IT fashion or more of a formalized fashion, no one's asking those questions about, hey, what logging is available? How can I get a copy of that logging? Is that logging something that I can get real time, or is it something that you're going to provide me once, twice, or whatever amount of the day? What details in there? Is there a way I can kind of pre-filter? I mean, I want the security events. I could care less about other types of events. No, hardly anyone's, especially the SMB space, is asking those questions. And the other thing is like, like the Chip's other point about correlation. Like, okay, it's one thing to gather that logs, but are you doing the work that you need to do as a provider to correlate those events with other applications to understand? Like Chip gave the example of 2 different geographies. If you're just getting events from this app and events from this app, and you're not correlating the two, you're not doing yourself or your client a service. You're doing them a disservice. So, there's a lot of work into dealing with these SaaS-based apps and explaining to your clients what the risks are if they adopt them without thinking about security thoroughly.
Yeah,
I'd add on to this, Andrew. This is one of the ongoing forever conundrums in cybersecurity is the tug of war between availability and productivity and security, right? We're always going back and forth between this. If you left it to the pure business side of the house, I'm going to throw those guys under the bus for a minute because it's always fun on a cyber call. You know, they'd be like, well, we just want to have everybody have access to everything whenever they need it and share it all over the world because that's how we grow our business. Well, and you know, that psychology intersects with the freemium model in how SaaS applications are sold. Hey, I just want to get Phyllis, a project manager, to jump in here and use my new SaaS, you know, charting tool. And I'm going to give her a free account because I'm going to hope to God that Phyllis is going to love this. She's going to tell the 10 people in, you know, in her group about it, and they're going to run off and try and buy an enterprise license. Like, that's why you have this massive proliferation, because it's very easy to sell SaaS products in a freemium mode, get one person in an organization hooked, transition them maybe to a very inexpensive subscription, and then have your team following up on the sales side to try and move that to an enterprise product. Like, it's a successful model. So people use it. And it's, you know, when you don't have to ship software, burn it on the CDs and spread it around, it's really easy to do. And then you wind up with this proliferation problem. Now, there are lots of tools available to every MSP, ours included, that would help you inventory what your customers are doing. And just doing that, like, is an eye opener for most small businesses, because you can almost be guaranteed the guy that's running, you know, 100-person small manufacturing company has no idea that they're using, you know, 30, 40, 50 different SaaS apps across that organization. And just telling them about it and what the risks are, you know, why do you really need this? You have software that you pay for to do this thing. You know, how about we discover why it's needed and get it out of the organization if it's not necessary?
Yeah, it should be important to the MSP, because guess what? If you don't find it and then something happens, you take the blame as the MSP, right?
Yeah.
You should have been on top of it.
You're supposed to know it all because you told your client you would know it all. That's exactly. Right. The other thing I would mention on the SaaS-based stuff, and we've mentioned it before, is that when we're dealing with incident response and we're dealing with these third parties, a lot of times people don't understand the relationship and they haven't paid attention to the contract language. So if we're in a position we have to investigate, and we have to say, okay, now we need to see, let's just say it's a ransomware attack, and we need to rule in or rule out that someone did gain access to a SaaS-based application. 99.9% of the time, we have to go through the vendor. And guess what the vendor will do once you tell them the reason why you're asking those questions? They will cut you off. And then they will want you to provide some kind of evidence that you're secure before they re-enable your access. So people don't understand that dynamic either.
Which let me get to this, Chris, before the end here, is like, what about, you know, evidence, you know, preservation, you know, when you have, like, you're trying to do your job, right, you know, and figuring out what's going on, you know, from a and from a evidence, right, preservation perspective. And then you have, like you said, the SaaS provider finds out there's a compromise, and why Chris Lair is calling them and, hey, we're shutting down access. And how can you walk us through this conundrum of how challenging this can be, and, you know, how you manage this process?
Yeah, a lot of times it's just through conversations, right? I mean, the hardest part is getting the third party on the phone call. If you can get them on a phone call and start talking through it with them, you're going to have more higher probability of success. A lot of times these guys have some letter or some form they want you to fill out, and quite frankly, there's a lot of information that we nor breach counsel or no one else feels comfortable about putting on paper and giving it to a third party that's not privileged. So that's that issue. But yeah, it is kind of interesting to try to figure out that a lot of these SaaS-based companies, and the smaller they are, the more prominent this is, where they don't really have a process to provide you the data from a forensics perspective. So you have to kind of go through an exercise to learn what they have available, how they're going to get it to you in a secure fashion. You know, and again, you don't know, a lot of times you don't know what they log until you're in this thing. You have to start asking questions, and hopefully they do have the amount of information going back as far as you need it, to the detail that you need it to kind of help you with these situations. But none of them are easy at this point. There's not just some simple process that you can go through where they just provide that to you. I think it, just to toot somebody's horn real quick, I think being in cases in the past where people have had like Screen Connect compromises and that type of thing of their own doing, meaning they did a bad job of securing their Screen Connect, like ConnectWise does have a process. but you have to know that process, and most people don't know that process until you have to go through it.
Okay. Chip, you were going to say something?
Yeah, one more comment on this. I think this is going to get a lot worse in terms of SaaS proliferation. And Andrew, I do a ton of research and reading specifically around machine learning and AI and what's going on with it. So literally every day in my mailbox or in my Twitter feed, I see, a message from somebody that's telling me that they just vibe coded this brand new SaaS app that is going to do X, Y, and Z for them. And they're already earning $40,000 a month in ARR, and they can teach you how to do it too. Well, we know a lot of that is a scam just to get you to do, jump in and join whatever they're building, but it's actually being done. Like, people are building SaaS applications and deploying them that are not developers. They're just smart business people who know there's a problem to solve. And they've realized, oh my God, I can spend, 5 hours in a day prompting and reprompting with one of the large language models, and it will build and deploy an app for me. Google just released Firebase Studio to do this. Anybody that's on this call that's never written a single line of code can go and use Firebase Studio and Gemini and build and deploy an app. So if we think it's bad now, with the number of SaaS apps that people are going to have access to and all the hooks in marketing to get them, it's going to get a lot worse.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people out there wanting to raise Porsches. Like yesterday. They're gonna use those LLMs to do it.
Good on them.
Keith, thanks for filling in. Send my best to Trent, and really appreciate you coming in on your trip there. Chip, real pleasure going through this. Again, in chat is the link, or just Google the SASE report. It's really well done and lots of data. Chris, thanks for jumping on. Phyllis, always wonderful. Have a great week, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Andrew.
Thanks, everybody.